There is a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between radio and bar talk, between commentary and recaps, and it lies between the pit of man's Netflix subscriptions and the summit of his binge-watching ability. This is the dimension of podcasting and the Twilight Zone. These are the Zone-i-Sodes. And now your hosts, Brandon Davis and Scott McFarland.
And hello to all of you out there in podcast world. This is the Front Row Movie Reviews. I'm your host, Brandon Davis. And this is our episode 23 of Zone-i-Sodes, the complete trek through the history of the Twilight Zone, episode by episode. And I have here with me the guy who is journeying along with me here through this trek, Scott McFarland.
You said trek a lot. I like that.
I
appreciate that. Trekking is good, especially in September when we start trekking again.
Oh, yeah.
Foreshadowing. Ha 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 ha.
Oh, man. So how you doing, Scott?
I am somewhat awake and ready to roll on episode 23 of 156.
Yeah, I'm seeing finally a light at the end of the tunnel on the first season, though.
Yes. That means we probably have to plan for what we're going to do for the end of the first season. We probably should plan that out a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. We should probably do something somewhat organized.
Which means it will not be organized, and we'll do it like right before it's due. But okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, we're talking about here episode 23, A World of Difference, which aired on March 11th, 1960. And do you have a plot synopsis for us, Scott?
I do, sir.
All
So
right.
Arthur is a family man, and my Microsoft Word doesn't like me. Arthur is a family man who has it all. A good job, a great family, and a vacation coming. His world comes crashing down when he realizes he is an actor, Gerald Reagan, and he is on a movie set. After basically kidnapping his ex, Arthur/Jerry tries to find his family only to learn they don't exist. Arthur Jerry is just a character in a movie script. His odd behavior forces the studio to cancel the movie production, and Arthur Jerry returns to the set just before it is torn down to find Arthur's wife. He begs her to leave with him as he faintly hears the stage crew in the background. On the movie set, Gerald Reagan is missing. The end.
Mhm. And I will read here the opening words of what Rod had to say at the beginning of this episode. You're looking at a tableau of reality. Things of substance, a physical material. A desk, a window, a light. These things exist and have dimension. Now this is Arthur Curtis, age 36, who is also real. He has flesh and blood, muscle and mind. But in just a moment, we will see how thin a line separates that which we assume to be real with that manufactured inside of a mind. So really interesting episode here. I kind of see this as a cousin to 60 millimeter Shrine a little bit, Scott.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of, because it's about actors who kind of live in the fantasy world more than the physical world.
yeah, it's basically we took 16 millimeter Shrine and flipped it on its side. Instead of the actor wanting to be a character, it's a character. Well, actually, no, it's the exact same. Never mind. It's not even flipped. It's the same.
Well, except in 60 millimeter Shrine, that really deals with sort of aging and the way that Hollywood discards women, and this one deals more with, the demons of alcoholism and depression and things like that.
Well,
But,
yeah, and I'm not entirely sure the themes go that strong into
Yeah.
it, but yeah, I mean, I think 16 millimeter Shrine definitely did that. I don't know if we can argue that, aside from saying that Jerry's a drunk, that we can really say there's a theme there, but we can try.
Yeah. We, well, no, what's interesting to me about this episode, though, is that Ida Lupino, who was the star of 60 millimeter Shrine, was married to Howard Duff, the lead of this episode.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So, a connection there. But as you've kind of given me a little bit about your thoughts on this episode, but what were your first impressions of this episode?
It's not a bad episode, but coming off the high that is the past few episodes, and obviously, I think I bent over backwards trying to point out how much I liked the last episode, Monsters That Do on Maple Street. That this is kind of when we're watching this in viewing order like this, it's kind of a letdown, and just the fact that we've come from something so good to something that is not bad, but it's in terms of the twist, there's not, the twist comes pretty early on, and you kind of because you've seen 16 millimeter Shrine, you kind of know what the end's going to be. But I mean, it's a good episode. There's some good acting, but it's nothing that I'm going to remember 10 years from now.
Yeah, it's a very solid, well-made, well-acted, well-executed episode. But when you have such a landmark episode like Monsters Are Due on Maple Street come right before it, anything, no matter how good it is, will probably seem a little bit like a letdown, just because that was such an original piece of work. And we've kind of seen Rod use this theme before, and I think probably in a little bit more of a stronger episode. But I think this episode has. I think Howard Duff is the real strength of this episode. He really is likable, and you really do feel for him throughout the whole episode, and you really begin to understand that this is a guy who's really trying to escape the unpleasantness of the world around him. But as we move forward, though, what works for you in this episode?
I agree with you. I think the acting is done really well, especially obviously the main character of Arthur / Jerry. You really feel for this guy, and just his bout with insanity as he kind of goes from the realization that something isn't right to figuring out that his entire life has disappeared. And every time he gets that realization that something has gone terribly wrong, you can just see in his face that his grasp on reality is drifting away farther and farther. One of the best scenes that shows that is when, and it's really quick and there's not much to it, but he calls the operator and he starts trying to argue with the operator that no, his number is listed, it should be there, and you just see in his face that he's just starting to realize that just because he thinks this is real, no one else around him does. So I think that worked out really well. I think the side characters did a good job. I think the ex was a bit over the top, but she is an ex, so potentially that's just how she acts. I mean, if Jerry really wronged her, I can see her acting like that. But I think the most of the folks did well, and the story was crisp and quick, and it definitely it didn't drag. So I mean, again, it's not to give away my score so quickly, but it's an average episode.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed when watching this episode was the direction of this episode. I thought was really strong, though. It felt kind of cinematic almost in a way, the way that certain things were shot. The final shot of the plane sort of disappearing and everything kind of lends itself more to sort of a movie feel in my mind. But as you mentioned, the acting is really strong, and I think aside from the ex-wife, a lot of the supporting players are really, really great and subtle, except for her. But I really like David White, who plays Brinkley, who's the agent who really sort of unmasks everything that's going on with Arthur / Gerald. But also as we sort of trek different actors who've played throughout the series here. David White is the second cast member of Bewitched. We had Dick York, the first Darren, and Purple Testament. We will see a lot more Bewitched cast members coming down the pike here.
Oh, they're all in the same. They're all in the same studio lot, so it's just a matter of walking across the street.
Yeah, true. But I really like him, and it's really. I have to say, even though the twist is obvious of what was coming, I really like the way it's set up at the end about how sort of, the lights come on and he's in his fantasy world and suddenly everything is, all right with him, which leads to back to reality when you see everybody looking for him, and then it fades to the plane disappearing. I think it's executed very well. I just think that as we mentioned before, probably those 60 millimeter Shrine probably made more of an important um, political statement, kind of, about aging and about, the treatment of women and things like that. Whereas this is a little more cut to the heart, emotional probably than that. But I think, I think overall though, it's a really, really solid episode. I mean, despite its weaknesses, unfortunately, it's just come after a bunch of really, really strong episodes in a row of original ideas, whereas we've seen this idea before.
Yeah, and we probably, and I started this, and I'll take full responsibility for it, but we're probably giving it too much of baggage and when we keep saying the twist, because really, unlike most Twilight Zone episodes, this does not have an ending twist. The twist is in the opening, basically, narration. You know that the twist is this guy thinks he is a businessman and a family guy, and it turns out that he is basically a half-rate actor who is on his last leg in terms of what the studio will let him do. So at the end, it's not really a twist. The question is, will he be able to get back to whatever reality he wants to be in? So I don't think it's a negative that the twist is easy to see because, well, it's right there. But part of that is because, and this is why we keep comparing things to other Twilight Zone episodes, is we're so used now to a big reveal at the end, and we're going to get that actually twice here in the next 2 weeks. That this is kind of an oddball in terms of just how the story flows. It's like an M. Night Shyamalan movie without a twist. It's odd.
Yeah, a little bit, but I'm looking here, and the episode was written by Richard Matheson, who I believe also wrote The Last Flight, I think. So this is which was a really great character study piece, and this is a really great character study piece. So and pretty interesting how they kind of coincide there. But as we move on though, and you've kind of alluded to some of it, but what doesn't work for you in this episode?
We're about 100 episodes away from this making sense, but I think this is the kind of episode that could have done better in season 4 when there was an hour to tell the story, because everything is so compacted. Because you have to get, Arthur figuring out what's going on or not figuring it out, have to deal with the agent, you have to deal with the ex, you have to deal with the loss of the family. Everything's so quick that you don't get enough time for these actors to breathe. And I think if the pacing was a little slowed down and we got to see more of the emotional turmoil, then I think that would have been better for it. And I kind of alluded to it last time too, is the character of his ex, it just there's quite a few things that just don't work for me on that. For one, she's overbearing as a character, but also the fact that she just allows herself to be kind of taken along for this ride. We like to have active characters and storylines, and she's not active at all.
Yeah, that's true. I when I watch some of these episodes, especially the ones that I haven't seen, I try and take, not detail, but take a couple notes or whatever. And the one thing I wrote was a lot of characters for a very short episode, very short period of time. I felt like there were a lot of people to try to get to know, because you had, all the technicians, the stagehands, you had the agent, the ex-wife, you had the little girl, which, that scene is interesting as well. But just a lot of people for Arthur to go through to get to the end of this episode.
And to compare it to, we've already compared it quite a bit to 60 millimeter Shrine, but 60 millimeter Shrine had really 3 active characters. It had the actress, her friend, and the studio head, and her actor friend who shows up at the very end, but really he's not much of a character, and I guess the maid. But another one that kind of deals with this loss of reality and a character study is Hitchhiker, and Hitchhiker has only a couple characters too. So I think if they would have followed that path of narration to kind of just, again, either extend out the time period, which obviously they couldn't because they have a half an hour and that's it. But if not, get rid of some of these extra folks and make the story truly about Arthur/Jerry trying to figure out who he is and what the heck's going on. And I think he would have had a much stronger story because you're right. The actor playing Arthur/Jerry can pull this off. Let's give him some more meat to chew.
Yeah. And I will give credit though to you mentioned though the twist is really in the opening, and I think that's really well done because for someone like me who hadn't seen this episode before, I didn't know what was happening for a second. You have that scene of the character in the office and everything, and then all of a sudden, you hear these voices in the distance saying cut and everything, and I think the reveal of the fact that it's in a studio is really well done in this episode, and it gives it sort of that cinematic feel like I was saying.
Yeah, and we haven't mentioned Sally the secretary at all, but I think the way they play that is pretty well too, because in Arthur's reality, she is very much, a by the book 1960s secretary, calling him Mr. So-and-so and all that. And then when he comes back to talk to her and turns out she's the actress, she's got her feet up on the desk and she's kind of lounging around. Yeah. So I do like that dichotomy too.
Yeah, and just to get back to the ex-wife, Eileen Ryan's her name, who plays Nora. I think she just plays it too. She plays it the stereotypical sort of shrewish ex-wife who you're just sort of made to hate. And I think had she shown a few more colors in her character and maybe actually a little bit of sympathy, somewhat, this could have been a little stronger of a character piece.
I will say my favorite line from the episode, though, is when they go into his house and the thing you hear off to the distance and you pan around to see her is, "Where's the checkbook?" I did like that. She's of one mind. She's like, I am taking this guy's money. I don't care. Yeah. You can kidnap me. You can say you're crazy. I'm still getting your bucks. Here we go.
I know, and I just, and when they're leaving the studio and he pulls her, into the car, I just can't, for as strong as they make her out to be, I'm like, I would never get in the car with this lunatic.
It's a different era, sir, I guess. No, it's not. No one would get in that car.
No. But it's funny because it seems like we're kind of rushing through this, but it's a solid, well done episode without really a whole lot to really dissect. Anything else about it? Yeah.
I am a doctoral student, and one of these days maybe I'll finish my dissertation. But what I think I'm going to do just for fun is I'm going to run a regression on looking at our scores and the runtime of the episode. And I'm going to guess, this is my hypothesis, the shortest runtimes will be average scores, and the longest runtimes will be poor scores. That's my guess. And then the high-scoring episodes will be somewhere in the middle. And we'll see how that comes out. I think I'm gonna play with stats a little bit and see what happens.
We spent a long time talking about the fever, I feel like.
That's what I'm saying. And I'm gonna be interested to see how that works out. I'm guessing that's the runtime's gonna be shorter on these average episodes.
Yeah, well, and it's just interesting because we're as I said before, we've kind of we've peaked for the first season, and now we're kind of downhill now because we're kind of in the last stretch of episodes here. Kind of, I feel like Monsters Are Due is kind of the end of the middle of the first season, and now we're sort of on the downhill slope of the last section. But we got some very strong episodes coming up here too, and this is just one of those very well written, very nice pieces that happens to just fall in the middle of some very unique landmark episodes from the mind of Rod Serling.
Yeah, and I'll say, I'm just looking at the list of what's coming up between now and episode 36 at the end of the season, and there are a couple that are still like some of the high caliber everyone thinks is one of the top episodes coming up, and then there's a couple of my guilty pleasures coming up too. Really? I'm looking at you, Mr. Beavis. So there's some good ones still coming, but you're right. I think when you're told you have an episode order of 36 episodes in a season, you're obviously going to have some highs and lows, which I think is we're going to see that a little bit again in season 2 when there's 29 episodes, and then it's going to go full bore. The shortest season is actually season 4 with 18 episodes, and that's because it came on halfway through the year. But we'll get into that conversation.
And thank goodness for us, because those are the hour-long ones. So.
Mm-hmm. But we'll get into that conversation in 2019 when we get there.
Okay.
Actually, it'll be 2019, I think. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
We were talking about a light at the end of the tunnel, Brandon. I just squashed that light. It was a little bug.
Well, I'm going season by season, so we'll see. But I was just, if this were to be an episode of another series besides Twilight Zone, you might be talking about one of the top episodes of that series.
Yeah, I agree.
Just because it's very well acted, well written, and it's pulled off wonderfully. But as we sort of wind down for this episode, I think we've mentioned we've got some really strong episodes coming down the pike here. But let's get to our scores here. And if you're just joining us for this episode, we rank these episodes on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being the best Twilight Zone has to offer, 5 being average, which is usually probably one of the better episodes of any other TV show, and 1 being just totally embarrassing. So, Scott, where would you put A World of Difference?
Well, we keep comparing it to the other episode. I'm going to do it again. I gave 16 millimeter Shrine a 6, a little bit above average, and I think this episode comes in below it. And so I'm going to give it a 5. I'm going to give it as an average episode. It was not bad at all, but it's not something I'm going to remember when I think back at what is the Twilight Zone.
I think I gave Millimeter Shrine a 7.
You gave it a 6 according to my little doohickey.
Did I give it a 6? Okay,
yes,
cool.
Sir.
I was keeping track and I lost track, but
I got it for you. I got a whole spreadsheet.
Great. Okay, great. But I'm gonna match you, because I was watching this and I said, this is the perfect example of an average Twilight Zone episode. Very well written, very well done, but doesn't quite stand out. So I gave it a 5 as well.
Sounds good.
So yeah, as we're coming now to the end of episode 23 here of Zone-i-Sodes, you coming down the pike. We're getting a little bit of a history lesson next week with Walter Jameson, and that'll be a fun episode to talk about. And got some really, really other strong episodes coming down the pike here. Scott, do you want to remind people about our new feed where they can find us?
Sure, you can find us every time we come out on the Zone-i-Sodes feed. The best way to find that is just to go to the frontrowmoviereviews.com. You'll see our podcast listed there. You can click on it and you can subscribe to our feed there. Or if you're listening to this already on your podcast app of choice, you can find in the show notes the link to the feed as well too. You can also email us at Zone-i-Sodes, that's ZONEISODES @gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We've got some amazing things going on right now at the front row and also here. First off, we just want to say thank you. Our best month was June, and we are recording this in the middle of July, just barely the Ides of July here, and we have already beat June. So we are getting a great deal of feedback from you. We really appreciate it, and we hope you continue to do that. And share with friends and let them know, either whether you hate us or love us, just share with people, let them know too. We were enjoying doing this, and we just want people to check us out. And we've got some really fun things coming your way. We're going to have some special guests that we'll talk about as we get a little closer coming up down the line. And we've got some interesting ideas of how to make this even more of a special conversation about this great show.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that we'll be giving more hints on next week's episode about some of the stuff we've got coming down the pike here. But
I'm tweeting with one of them right now.
Wonderful. And as we close out this episode, though, I think it's appropriate to finish with what Rod had to say. The modus operandi for the departure from life is usually a pine box of such and such dimensions. And this is the ultimate in reality. But there are other ways for a man to exit from life. Take the case of Arthur Curtis, age 36. His departure was along a highway with an exit sign that reads, this way to escape Arthur Curtis en route to the Twilight Zone.
Life is a highway. Sorry. I can do Highway to Heaven.
If only Rascal Flatts scored that.
Rascal Flatts. Springfield, sir.
Yeah, that's true. And so as we
I'll tell you, let me tell you a very quick story. So
Sure.
I'm not a countryman at all. And
Yeah.
I decided for my wife's birthday, or maybe it was a Christmas gift several years ago, that I was going to take her to a Rascal Flatts concert.
Mhm.
And the opening act was a guy I had no idea who the heck he was. It was Darius Rucker.
Oh yeah.
So he pops out on stage and like, holy crap, it's Hootie. That was the best conference concert I ever been. Because it was a Hootie concert. But I'm just amazing what you find at country shows.
That's true. You never know who's going to pop up.
I'm such a child of the 90s. I'm sorry.
Anyway, but as we come to the conclusion here of episode 23, we thank you once again for joining us for Zone-i-Sodes. We're just moving right along here, and even though it may seem like, well, it will be probably 2020 before we finish this.
Brandon, that's another classic we have to do, by the way, because as you said, moving right along. Now I have Kermit and Fozzie Bear.
Movie?
Moving right along. Footloose and fancy free. Okay.
Yeah, we got to do that. We got to do that. And so anyway, though, as we close this episode of Zone-i-Sodes, I am Brandon Davis.
And I am Kermit the Frog, I guess.
Yeah. And we will see you on the couch.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Zone-i-Sodes. Zone-i-Sodes is a special presentation of the Front Row Movie Reviews podcast. For more information, go to www.thefrontrowmoviereviews.com.